just a very brief interaction with some people that I found I really like studying. And there's, as I put this slideshow together, I recognize there's so much more studying to do of these people, and all the people that are current today that didn't make it to this list. Plus, there are lots of other people in the past. So here we go. These are some of the groundbreaking women. This is a list of the ones we're going to go over, not in any particular order here. And you may recognize some of these names. And of course, during this, if you guys want to give me other names that I can add to this presentation for the future, I would love it. Anybody who's made an impact on you or someone that you've enjoyed seeing their work. In photography, when I think about what it's, what we do with it, documentation of time and place, editorial, photojournalism, science, art, portrait, advertising, personal artistic expression. And you see a lot of people making a difference in the world with this skill and just the exploration of the skill. They don't have to be an actual professional photographer to add, to the world through photography. And I noticed in preparing for this program that in so many of the collections of master photographers and exhibitions, there really aren't very many women being noted or, in the indexes or, highlighted. So that there's more work being done on highlighting them. And there are some really good books out there that are just on women in photography that are worth looking at. Also, I've created a resource sheet for you, which I don't know where I'll put it, but I'll make it available to you. Maybe I'll email it. I don't know. So I thought I'd start with Julia Margaret Cameron, who was a British photographer in the Victorian era. And she was one of the most important portraitists of the 19th century. She was known for her soft focus close-ups. And here's a portrait of her on the left, and then some examples of her work there. She photographed, one thing that's pretty neat is she photographed a lot of her friends and peers who were actors, writers, and artists whose names you would know. And you can see here the depth of field is really, the soft focus is really impactful. Gertrude Cassibier was an amazing woman in New York City. She was a true businesswoman who had a commercial portrait studio in New York City and did some Native American work as well. They had a parade going down, I think it was Fifth Avenue one year, and she went out and she asked if she could photograph these beautiful people in their ceremonial costumes, and made some gorgeous portraits, which you can see one of right there. The two portraits on the left are her. The one on the right of the two, she had manipulated that. And it's pretty cool, I thought. She and Stieglitz were friendly for a while, but then they fell out of favor with each other. The image down at the bottom is one of the museum collections, and it just shows her more ethereal, the things that she could do. She studied psychology, drawing, painting, and she even studied chemistry of photography as well. Bernice Abbott, there's a portrait of her on the left. She was known for, during the avant-garde years, and she was known for her, once she moved back to New York City, for her documentary photographs during the Great Depression for the works, the federal government, basically. And there are some images there that are kind of pixelated, I'm sorry, on the lower right, but the one on the lower left is very dramatic, and gives you an idea of the scope of her vision and ability to capture the most powerful and impactful things of a very powerful and impactful city. But she early on studied in Paris and Berlin. She actually studied sculpture, and she worked in Man Ray's Paris studio. And that's when she became interested in photography. She was also really instrumental in preserving the photographer Eugene Atget's works and bringing them to New York City. Doris Ullman, who I hadn't heard of before I started the research for this particular slideshow, She was a secular humanist, best known for her intimate and revealing portraits of the Appalachian people. She was a student of Clarence White. And she trained as an art photographer in the 1910s and was known as a pictorial photographer, which is dynamic and artistic photography, not documentary or commercial. However, she did end up doing this documentary stuff in the Appalachian areas. That's a portrait of her with her camera on the left and some of the work that she's done. Imogen Cunningham lived in a lot of different places, but I think she's well known in California, especially. She was known for her industrial, nude, and botanical photography, and she worked for Edward Curtis on his Native American photography project. She moved from pictorialism with the softer focus, which you see here, the third image, into sharp focus, which was with the F-64 group. The two portraits of her on the left show, you can kind of pick up some of her fun. And then on the right, she was known for botanicals, very straight approach, but yet she still had this incredible eye of finding things of interest to share with the viewers. On the lower right, you can see that. Dorothea Lange was her most recognizable image is Migrant Mother, which you see there with the woman with her two kids. She was documenting the Great Depression for the Farm Security Administration. And you can see a couple of her images there on the left. I forgot to write the number one, but the top one is Tractored Out, Childress County, Texas in the 1936. And the one on the bottom is Ditched, Stalled, and Stranded, San Joaquin Valley, California, 1935. Margaret Bourke White was, you can see her images here. You might be familiar with them too. She was known for her architectural and industrial photography. And it was hard for her as a woman to make her way into this niche, but she did talk Otis Industrial into letting her into their defense factory. It was a steel factory, and they were worried about, letting out too much information and also how this whole thing would go down. But what she did was she convinced them that it was worth a try, and she did a remarkable job. Everyone was amazed. She brought in magnesium flare to produce light, and they say that created the most beautiful lighting of steel industrial forms that they had ever seen. So there she is on the left, and in the middle, that's one of her images that you might have seen before. And then there's a picture of a portrait of Gandhi. She was a war correspondent. She was one of the only female war correspondents. And she was also the first foreign photographer allowed to take pictures of Soviet industry. So she had a lot of strength. Annie Leibovitz, now we're getting into more contemporary. Annie Leibovitz, she is, you probably are familiar with her, but she developed a real look through her work with Rolling Stone and Vanity Fair, where she did painterly posed fashion portraits in soft lighting. And she did, her work is like movie stills, it's cinematic, and there's a lot of Rembrandt in her portraits, which I actually didn't put one of those examples up here, but you have Whoopi Goldberg in the milk bath, which you might remember was groundbreaking. And then her in her workspace, and then you have Mick Jagger. Then Yoko Ono and John Lennon, and I guess that might be Willie Nelson there. And then one of her many movie still type images that she created. Barbara Kruger is a conceptual artist and collagist. She does a confrontational combination of photographs and text, and she has a commentary on women's identity and the pressures that are within it. So there's a portrait of Barbara, and then she's putting together these photographs with text. We don't need another hero. I shop, therefore I am. And then that's other one at the lower right just gives you an example of the installation impact she creates. I think all of these people have been exhibited in museums. Carrie Mae Weems did a lot of things. She was in dance, and she was a Marxism organizer, but in 1973, she started working in photography. She got her first camera, I think, and got going on that and fell in love with it. Her work in text, fabric, audio, digital images, and installation video are all acclaimed, in addition to her work in photography. And in the 1990s is when she became very noticed in photography with her kitchen table series. There's a portrait of Carrie, and then the cover of the exhibition catalog of her kitchen table series, and then an example of some of her installations. Cindy Sherman, she's well known for her fun and unusual self-portraits where she imagines herself in different scenarios and made up things. She was an emerging artist in the late 1970s and 80s, along with Robert Mapplethorpe and Barbara Kruger. They were represented in art galleries together. She was of the Pictures generation, which was named for some exhibitions that were organized at MoMA and in New York City from 1974 to 1984. And so these are some examples of her work. Diane Arbus was best known for intimate black and white portraits and personal observations of the people who are on the fringe in American society. She first worked in commercial photography with her husband until she burned out in the 1950s and moved to street photography. There's a picture of her here on the lower left, actually doing her street photography. And there she was picking up on the irony in daily life, the fringe, all the different odd things you can see and how you see them, she felt was unique for her, and she was recording humanity. She said, "I really believe there are things nobody would see if I didn't photograph them." She also said, "A photograph is a secret about a secret. The more it tells you, the less you know." And her early street photography work was exhibited at MoMA in 1967 in an exhibition called New Documents, along with Gary Winogrand and Lee Friedlander, and that was groundbreaking at the time. So her images here, you might have known about the twins. These are types of things she would explore and put out there for viewers to consider the differences and the similarities between the twins, but also between themselves and the subject matter. Mary Ellen Mark also photographed people on the fringe. She was a photojournalist. She was in documentary photography. She was known for her portraiture. And she was photographing people out of the mainstream. You see her here in her exhibition with the picture that's down in the lower middle. And then on the lower left, you see her with a subject. And these are just some of her examples there. Sally Mann is known for her large format black and white photographs, which started out of just taking pictures of her young children, and then later, and she continued with that, but later she moved into landscapes, suggesting decay and death. And so if you've seen her work, she often prints very large. She's also very controlling over how the images work out and how they're exhibited in the exhibit space. And that is my last person. I'm trying to keep it quick because I know people have to go, but I wanted to give you a teaser of all these people, and these are the resources, and I have that in a PDF, which I'll share with you guys.